Hello, and welcome to the Channel of Stories. Dear listeners, before we start the story, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like and share in the comments where you are from. Thank you. Here we go.
I was 20 when I married Jason, young enough to believe that effort could substitute for compatibility, that working on it was the same as being in love. He wasn't a monster. He didn't scream or cheat or gamble. But his presence was like wallpaper, always there, never helping, never moving forward. He never noticed things. We were still for too long. Still in the way stagnant water is still, quiet but slowly breeding something toxic. It wasn't always that way. Early on, he made an effort. Dates, flowers, sweet texts. But it faded like the scent of old perfume. Life got heavy, and he didn't lift a finger to help carry it. I became the default parent, the house manager, the emotional anchor, and the breadwinner. Meanwhile, Jason became a couch-shaped man with opinions about how tired I seemed. He wasn't malicious, just chronically passive. If marriage was a dance, he stopped moving and let me drag him across the floor. It wore me down. Not in one dramatic collapse, but in 1,000 small silences, in every undone chore, every forgotten birthday, every time I cried in the bathroom while he played another level of Candy Crush. And yet I stayed. 4 years. Because I believed leaving meant failing. Infertility was a storm I weathered alone, even while married. 3 years of pills, shots, waiting rooms. Hope bloomed every month and died just as fast. I tracked everything: ovulation, symptoms, moods. I became fluent in hormone charts. But my heartbreak? It fell on deaf ears. Jason didn't comfort me. He offered empty phrases, like tossing dry leaves into a bonfire. It'll happen when it's meant to. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. I started to wish he'd just say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. But he wasn't there. Not really. I remember this one awful day, after my third failed IUI attempt. I came home and collapsed on the bed, eyes swollen from crying in the car. I told him I couldn't do it anymore, that I felt like I was disappearing inside this grief. He didn't even turn off the TV. I felt insane. I was insane. Insane with grief, and gaslit by someone who insisted I wasn't really in pain. I stopped bringing it up. Not because I stopped hurting, but because hurting aloud in front of him made me feel more alone than suffering in silence. One night, I held a positive test in my hands, only to start bleeding 2 hours later. He shrugged and said, maybe it was just a weird month. That was when something inside me hardened. And I knew, he might be my husband, but he was no longer my person. It didn't explode. It faded. I thought ending a marriage would feel like ripping off skin, but when I finally said the words, I think you should leave, Jason just nodded. No argument. No tears. Just our acceptance. He packed a single duffel bag and left his drawer full of socks. I remember staring at those socks afterward, like they were relics of some ancient civilization. And then, almost immediately, peace. There were messes. The kids asked questions. My family blinked in disbelief. But underneath the panic, there was clarity. I slept. I really slept. Not just collapsed. I started playing music in the kitchen again. I lit candles I'd hidden from him because the scent gave him headaches. I had so much space, I didn't know what to do with it. I was free. But I was also raw. Being strong alone becomes a badge of honor, but it's a lonely kind of trophy. There were nights I would lie in bed, hearing the creak of the hallway, expecting the tension of his footsteps. but they never came. And that absence became its own form of comfort. I wasn't broken. I was bruised. And slowly, I started remembering what it felt like to want things again. To dream again. Eli arrived that summer like a surprise breeze through an open window. He was the youngest intern we'd ever had, bright-eyed, polite, terrifyingly competent. On paper, he was all wrong for me. A 22-year-old engineering major with a car full of protein bars and ambition. But he had a presence. A quiet steadiness that made you want to stand up straighter around him. I noticed how he held space for people. How he looked people in the eye when they spoke, and didn't just wait for his turn to talk. He complimented people without flattery. He listened without trying to solve. We got paired for a group project. I figured I'd be doing most of the heavy lifting, but Eli surprised me. He was meticulous, collaborative, even funny in this dry, self-deprecating way that made me laugh out loud, something I hadn't done in a meeting in years. We talked. A lot. During breaks. After hours. About books. About philosophy. About what it meant to live a good life. When his internship ended, I figured that was it. A pleasant blip. A nice kid with potential. Then he came back for the weekend, and kissed me. It wasn't impulsive. It was careful. Like he'd considered it for days. Like he was giving me a choice. I didn't stop him. And in that moment, something shifted. Not because I wanted a younger man. But because, for the first time in years, I felt wanted. After that weekend, we kept in touch. At first, it was small things, memes, funny tweets, short texts about the books we were reading. But slowly, we slid into something else. Something that felt light. Real. He'd ask how my day was and actually wait for the full answer. He remembered things I said a week ago. Asked about my kids, not out of obligation, but genuine curiosity. Still, I braced myself. For the day he'd realize he was 22, single, and didn't need to be tied to someone with mortgage stress and juice stains on her shirt. But he didn't pull away. I confessed my exhaustion one day, how parenting had stretched me thin, how I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore. You still sparkle, he said. You just don't notice it because you've been carrying too much. I didn't cry. I wanted to. But instead, I laughed. Because who says that? Who sees that? The first night I slept at his apartment, I crashed hard. Not because I felt sexy or romantic, but because I felt safe. And when I woke up to a roommate telling me Eli had WD-40'd all the hinges while I slept, I nearly lost it. It wasn't just thoughtful. It was intimate. Reverent. Almost. And suddenly I realized this wasn't a fling. It was a spark I hadn't known I was missing. It didn't happen in a montage. It was slower than that. Eli started coming over. Not as a guest, but like someone finding a rhythm inside my chaos. He'd walk in, take off his shoes, and ask if I'd eaten. Not as a formality, he really wanted to know. One night, my daughter was mid-meltdown over a pink spoon and my son was asking algebra questions I hadn't thought about since 1998. The dog was barking. The cat was throwing up. I was holding a pot with one hand and my sanity with the other. Eli stepped in. Give her to me, he said gently. I'll take her outside. You stir. No lectures. No rescue complex. Just presence. 10 minutes later, I looked out the kitchen window and saw him twirling my daughter in the yard like she was a princess in a Pixar movie. The dog trotted behind them, leash in his mouth like a sidekick. I wanted to cry. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because for once, I wasn't. When he came back in, he didn't ask for praise. He just said, do you need a break after dinner? I can do baths. And he did. He did them. Right down to brushing tiny teeth and reading the same story 3 times in a row because the rabbit didn't get enough hugs yet. That night, I realized I hadn't felt this kind of steady support or ever. It wasn't glamorous. But it was everything. Eli doesn't perform love. He just lives it. He never makes a show out of helping. He doesn't brag about his stepping up or ask for points. But because of that, it's even more noticeable. Once, I dropped off lunch for him at school. It was nothing fancy, just a chicken sandwich and a handwritten note tucked under the napkin. He was swamped with finals, and I thought it might make him smile. But when I handed it over, he barely looked up. Thanks, he muttered, and turned back to his laptop. I drove away with a pit in my stomach. I told myself he was just busy. But after everything we'd shared, that one cold interaction stung deeper than it should have. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Hey, he said, voice low. I was a jerk. That lunch? That was really thoughtful. And I didn't act like it. I'm sorry. I didn't know what shocked me more, the apology or the fact that he noticed how he made me feel without me saying a word. Jason never apologized without prompting. With Eli, accountability wasn't some forced ritual. It was a natural part of how he moved through the world. It wasn't just the apology. It was the fact that he wanted to do better. And in this world, that's rare. I used to brace myself before introducing someone to my kids. Not because they were wild, though sometimes, yes, but because I'd seen the way men reacted. Like the kids were obstacles to endure until they could get me alone again. Eli didn't flinch. From the first moment, he knelt down, made eye contact, and asked them real questions. Not, what grade are you in? But what's your favorite animal and why? My son challenged him to Mario Kart. Eli lost. Twice. And still declared my kid the reigning champ of the household. My daughter drew him into her imaginary world without hesitation. She handed him a plastic tiara and dubbed him a night daddy within days. He wore it. Happily. One night, she had a nightmare and padded into the living room where we were watching a movie. Without missing a beat, Eli paused the screen and scooped her into his arms. Want me to sit with you until you fall asleep? He asked. She nodded. And he did. For almost an hour. No complaint. No phone. Just quiet presence. Later, I whispered, you don't have to do that. He looked confused. But I want to. I didn't know people like that existed. And it broke something open in me I didn't realize was still locked. It was bound to happen. A late-night argument. Not loud, but layered. We were talking about time, about how he still had years of life stretching ahead of him, unburdened by the weight I carried every day. I asked, aren't you afraid you'll miss out on something? Some simpler path? He paused. No, he said. Because I didn't stumble into this. I walked in. Eyes open. But it's hard, I pushed. I come with baggage. A whole carry-on and a checked bag. He grinned. Good thing I packed light. I laughed, but the fear didn't leave. You could go anywhere, Eli. Do anything. What if one day, this isn't enough? He reached across the couch and took my hand. Then that day isn't today. And until it is, I'm here. It wasn't a sweeping declaration. It was better. It was real. He wasn't promising forever. He was choosing me right now. And promising to keep choosing. And that's the kind of love that lasts. It's not always romantic. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's just sitting on the floor folding laundry while a toddler sings the same off-key tune for the 5th time. But that's love. It's Eli walking into the kitchen after a brutal day and saying, I ordered dinner. You're not cooking tonight. It's him texting me during a meeting, breathe. You've got this, like he can sense when I'm drowning even from miles away. It's how he looks at me when I'm unshowered, unfiltered, and unfazed by the chaos, and still sees beauty. One night, we stood in the doorway after putting the kids to bed. The house was quiet, for once. He looked at me and said, You make hard look easy. But I see the weight. And I'm here to carry some of it. I didn't know what to say. So I hugged him. Held on like I hadn't in years. Because this isn't a fairy tale. This is better. This is what happens when someone chooses you, not just at your best, but at your most undone. When love isn't a performance, but a practice. A choice made again and again in the middle of the chaos, the noise, the imperfection. Eli is my safe place. Not because he rescued me, but because he walked into the fire I was managing alone, and stayed. And every day, in 1,000 quiet ways, he reminds me, I don't have to be everything to everyone anymore. Because now, I'm someone too.